My friends, Ernie Michel was a real hero of Jewish life. A survivor of Auschwitz, Ernie became a devoted member of the Jewish people and served for 20 years as Executive Vice President of the United Jewish Appeal and personally shepherded the merger that created the UJA Federation of New York, which then served as a model for similar mergers throughout Jewish America. Ernie was also responsible for creating the World Gathering of Holocaust Survivors in Jerusalem, and he wrote a moving autobiography about his surviving the Holocaust entitled Promises to Keep: One Man's Journey Against Incredible Odds. And Ernie Michel was most kind and generous to me, meeting with me anytime I asked him, on camera and off. Ernie Michel passed away on May 7th, 2016, at the age of 92. As the Jewish world commemorates Kristallnacht, it's an honor to replay for you my meeting with Ernie Michel and to hear his description of living through one of the darkest moments in Jewish history. I hope you enjoy knowing Ernie Michel. Do you mind telling me how old you were on November 9th, 1938?
Not at all.
How old were you?
I was 16 years old in November of 1938 when I watched our synagogue go down in flames.
Where were you?
I was working at that time in one of the few Jewish businesses still functioning outside of my hometown. And it was a town called Bruchsal, which is maybe 15, 20 miles from Mannheim. That synagogue burned down that night. In the morning, the owner of the factory and his family were arrested. I was not, because I was just less than 16 years old. I was 15 and a half. And they told me to go home. And I went home to Mannheim. And there I saw our synagogue already burned down, destroyed, bombed, dynamited.
Ernie, did you see this coming as a 15, 16-year-old?
My whole upbringing was affected by what happened in Germany, what happening during the Nazi period. I was 10 years old when Hitler came to power. My upbringing, my family's life was affected by what was happening. My father lost his business.
What was his business?
He was in the cigar factory business in Germany. And eventually, life became very, very tough and difficult.
Okay, take it with me slow. Your father's name?
Otto.
Your mother's name?
Frieda.
How many children in your family?
I have one sister. She is the only other member of my family who survived.
Older or younger?
She's younger. She lives in Israel. She lives in a kibbutz about 1.5 miles from the Jordan border. Kenahora. She has 4 children and 13 grandchildren.
Oh, Mazel tov.
That's
Her
one
name?
of the real pleasures. Her name is Lotte.
Okay.
Lotte Rhein.
So Ernest and Lotte are living in Mannheim.
Yes.
With their mother and father.
Right.
Do you remember being close to your parents?
Very much so.
Okay. When your father lost his business, what year are we talking about?
Oh, this was in the middle 30s, 35, 36, around that time.
Did it change him?
Oh, very much so.
How?
He became very serious. He became very firm. We all were impacted by what happened. Our life was impacted. I couldn't go to school anymore. I was kicked out of school in the 7th grade, never went back. No movies, no theaters, no parks, nothing was allowed to you. And you grew up under that. And I believe that, I had no childhood. It was taken away from me.
Were you angry?
I was scared. More than angry, I was scared. My parents tried to get me out of Germany. But in order to get out, you need an affidavit. You have to have a visa. We had no relatives here in this country. It was impossible for us to get out, and therefore I was never able to get out of Germany.
Was your sister scared also? Do you remember?
Well, my sister is 5 years younger than I was.
She'd be 10?
She was 10 years old. I tell you the truth, we didn't get along too well, you know, as siblings at that time. We love each other today. But she was able to get on a children's transport a few weeks after Kristallnacht to France. And just parenthetically, she was saved by Catholic nuns being kept in a convent during the war, and eventually she was brought to Israel by Youth Aliyah and wound up there in 1944.
A wonderful, heroic story.
A beautiful story.
A contribution of the Catholic community that sometimes
Beautiful
Jews
story.
forget.
She was saved by them.
You say you were frightened.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember any one specific incident that was frightening for you prior to Kristallnacht?
Well, there's several. I had two non-Jewish friends, Kurt and Months. I remember their names till this day. We were inseparable. And early in the 30s, I was cut. They didn't know me anymore. They walked away, walked the Hitler Youth uniform, and I didn't exist anymore. The first time I was thrown out from school, I used to be a soccer player, couldn't play soccer anymore. Slowly the noose was tighter and tighter.
Help us understand, Ernie, you know, the American Jew who grew up post-Holocaust only understands this in a one step removed.
Mm-hmm.
Most Jews have never experienced anything like what you're talking about. And I know I'm pressing you, and I know it's difficult a bit, but I want you to try to remember the moment. Did some teacher come up to you and say, did you put your soccer uniform on and go out in the field and somebody tap you on the shoulder and say, get out? How does a child learn he is no longer on the soccer team?
Mark, I have a picture memory of the things that happened to me. As a matter of fact, if I may say so, I'm writing a book about my experiences right now. And I remember the incident. This was in 35, 36. I was 12, 13 years old. I came to school, and being a soccer player, we lined up, and the coach took me aside. I think he was almost embarrassed. And he said, Ernst, you know, it used to be Ernst in Germany, you better put your suit back on, you won't be able to play. He says, why can't I play? He says, well, there are certain rules and regulations, and today I have to tell you, you will no longer be able to play, and I think you better leave. I believe this was the first time that I really felt what it meant to be a Jew, a Jewish kid in Germany living under the Nazis. That was the first impression.
Now, he never used the word Jew.
No, never
But
did.
you understood.
Of course. Of course.
Mm-hmm. Then you were kicked out of school.
I was kicked out
Tell
of
me
school.
about that moment.
Well, there was I was going to a regular public school, and one day after classes were over, the teacher, who was a very decent guy, remember his name was Herr Christ, fine individual, came to me and says, I'm sorry to have to tell you and to the other Jewish boys that beginning tomorrow you will not be able to come back. I didn't have to ask any questions. I knew what it was about. That was the end of schooling. There was an effort made to create a Jewish school with kids being put together from many grades. It never worked. So at the age of 13, 14, my schooling came to an end.
Prior to these type of moments, the soccer moment, the school moment, did Ernie Michel feel like he was a German?
In the early days, I was grown up to be a Jew in Germany. To me, it made very little difference. I was proud of being Jewish. We had a Jewish home. We went to the synagogue. We celebrated the holidays. I was bar mitzvah. I was German and I was Jewish. But slowly, as the noose got tighter, we realized that there was a big difference between being Jewish and being German, and we found it out later on in a way that none of us could even imagine.
So you come back to Mannheim and you find that your synagogue there has been burned to the ground. Did you literally see it?
Oh yeah.
You walk around a corner and there it is, or what?
I'll tell you exactly how it happened. I arrived in Mannheim early in the morning of November the 10th. The first thing I noticed coming out of the train station were Jewish stores destroyed, with the windows broken in. And I says, God, what's going to happen now? And I went to our apartment. We lived on a street called Richard Wagner Street, number 26. And our apartment was ransacked. My mother was beaten. My father was not there. He had been arrested. My grandmother, in her 80s, was sitting there frightened, totally frightened, not knowing what's going to happen. My sister wasn't there. And I come into this apartment, our home, and it's gone. Furniture destroyed, dishes thrown out. My father was a stamp collector. The stamp collection was thrown out of the window and burned. His whole life had been the stamp collection. Destroyed within a few minutes. Everything that we had was gone. Nothing left anymore. Then I went to the synagogue just to see what happened. Was gone. It was only a shell.
What do you feel at that time?
I was scared. What was going to happen to us? The home destroyed, the synagogue destroyed. What would happen next?
Do you remember speaking to your mother at all?
Well, after my mother sort of composed herself, she told me what had happened. The brown shirts SR had broken into the apartment. Somebody in the building was leading it, who knew us. She was beaten up, trying to protect her mother, my grandmother. They didn't pay any attention. But she composed herself. She said, you better see whether your father is coming back or not. Now you better stay here. Well, there was no point. I couldn't go back to the factory anymore. It was finished. That was November 10th, Kristallnacht, 1938.
Do you remember any tears by anyone?
Well, my mother was very upset. I don't think I was crying. I mean, I was 16, but I believe I was older than 16. You know, living through that period makes you makes you tough. And as I say, I was scared. When you're scared, you don't cry. You worry what's going to happen to you.
Now, this feeling of fright that is so overwhelming, which is initiated by Kristallnacht with a dynamism that, as frightened as you may have been before, this is a new level of fear. That really is the horror of the event, isn't it?
Well, the horror of it is the uncertainty as to what's going to happen to you and your family. My sister is in France by now, taken across the border. My mother is beaten up. The apartment is destroyed. My father is arrested. What's going to happen now? How are we going to live? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my mother?
And it's in that sense that it is the, quote, beginning of the Holocaust.
I consider, people may disagree with me, Kristallnacht, the real beginning of the Holocaust.
Elie Wiesel comments that the Jew who had the means to could still leave Germany in 1938, and therefore he feels there is a qualitative difference between the event of Kristallnacht and later events of the Holocaust where the Jew really was trapped whether he wanted to leave or not. And in that way, he does not want to call this the beginning of the Holocaust. It seems to me that emotionally, however, there is a link between what happened to you and your family on November 9th and 10th of 1938 and what ultimately was going to happen to the Jewish people in the early and middle 40s.
I disagree with Elie Wiesel in that respect. Even Jews in Germany who had money had to have an affidavit in order to get out. My parents were not well-to-do anymore, but I knew people in Mannheim who had money, but they didn't have relatives anywhere. They couldn't get out, despite all their money. So it was impossible for Jews in 38. People then began lining up. You know, there was a positive reaction in the sense that people wanted to see, could they get out? The handwriting was on the wall. Nobody could imagine gas chambers. Who would have dreamt of that?
I understand.
But you tried to get out. So they were lining up in front of consulates, left and right, in any way possible.
And was this true of your family also?
Of course, it was true. It's a long story. I don't want to bother you with it. To belabor the point, I had an affidavit finally from a non-Jewish family. We didn't know any Jews. A very substantial affidavit, which would have permitted me to get out of Germany. But the moment you lined up at the consulate, which was in Stuttgart, Germany, you were given a number, a quota number. Now this was in late 38, early 1939. That number would have been called in the year 1942. So I could have had a chance to get out, but the American quota system made it impossible, even when you had an affidavit, to get out in time.
Then explain something else to me, Ernie. Why was it, when I hear you describe your reaction, your family's reaction, what you experienced, and this tremendous desire to get out, why is it that there were so many Jewish German families that believed they could ride the storm out, and they did not line up at Stuttgart or anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. It's true. German Jews have a great history. The German Jewish community was a well-to-do, accepted community within Germany. And there were many governments after the Weimar Republic. One government, another chancellor, another chancellor. I remember it from living through it. And Jews in Germany believed that Hitler would pass, that it was just one other government.
Even after Kristallnacht?
No, not after Kristallnacht. There was no question any longer as to what was going to happen. Not the degree what happened, but it was clear by that time you had to get out if you had a chance.
Really?
I'm talking about before.
And I'm talking about after.
No, after that time there was not a Jew that I know of in Germany who didn't want to get out.
And so the tragedy was they couldn't get out.
At that time you couldn't get out anymore.
And because your quota number would have kept you in Germany till 1941 and 42, you ended up at Auschwitz.
That's correct.
And your family?
My father and mother were killed in Auschwitz.
Were you taken together?
No, I was sent to my first camp 3 days after the outbreak of the war. My parents remained in Mannheim. They were deported to a French camp called Gurs in October 1940. They spent 2 horrible years there, and they were sent in September 1942 to Auschwitz, where they were killed.
One time I'm going to want you to come back here and talk to me about what it was like for a 16, 17-year-old to wind up at Auschwitz. Actually, that you were a little bit older than that, were you not?
I was 16 in 1939, right.
But right now, how did you survive?
Mark, I've been asked that question many times. I have no answer. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. I was brought up in a good Jewish home. I had a good upbringing, and maybe providence. I went into this work of UJA because of what happened to me. It had an impact on me beyond anything that I can describe. And I'm glad that I had an opportunity over the last 42 years that I've been involved in this to play a role in making at least the Jewish community a better one.
30 seconds. What's the eternal message of Kristallnacht?
The message that I take out of it, which is a positive one, that may surprise you, that despite all of the things that happened to us, some of us did survive, showing the strength and the power of survival of the Jewish people. That, to me, is one of the most important lessons that we can take from it.
This is a personal memoir of your journey first into the Holocaust. It begins basically with Kristallnacht, which you've had the opportunity to talk to our L'chaim audience about before.
I remember that.
And then from that night on, it tells the story of an incredible survival, and then brings us right through a wonderful career of service to the Jewish community, both here in America and really throughout the world. I want to quote a passage from your book. You mention, as you describe your first night at Auschwitz, you say, "At that moment, I decided to take in every detail. If I survived, I'd be able to write about it." And then you reflect even in that moment about how incredible it is that that was what was going through your mind. But I was very moved by the fact that you were aware even then that you were not only witnessing history, but that if you survived, you wanted to write. Do you remember that experience?
Extremely well.
Talk to me about it.
I must tell you that when we arrived in Auschwitz, we had no idea what this was to be. You could not imagine people being gassed. I mean, how do you, in your wildest imagination, think about that people are being put in a chamber and being gassed? When we arrived, we realized this was not another labor camp. And seeing what I saw, I thought, if I survive, I would want to write about it. I've always enjoyed writing.
Incidentally, Ernie, this was even before you knew it was a gas camp.
That was before.
camp.
That was before.
You
I
were
knew-
now in the selection process.
Right, correct.
And you were already thinking to yourself, I have to write about this
That
one
is
day.
right.
I also was fascinated to learn, and you make reference to this time and time in the beginning of your book, that you and your friends did not know what Auschwitz was. You'd heard about this death camp. I thought everyone by that time did know. We're talking about February of 43 when you arrive at Auschwitz. And you're telling us that in February of 43, you and your friends did not know for a fact that Auschwitz was a death camp.
That is correct. We did not know. We had heard the name. It was some camp in the east, but we did not know that it was an extermination camp.
Should that surprise us, that you didn't know?
You have to keep in mind, Mark, that we were incarcerated since the early 40s, kept in labor camps, one after another. We had no access to any news. We didn't know what was going on. So, no, I don't think it's surprising that we didn't know, and a large part of the public then did not know. I found it out the next day when they told us, you know, you are lucky. I thought, lucky? Have no clothing, hair shorn, being a number on the arm. And I'm lucky. He says, you know why? Die anderen sind schon im Kamin. The others already went up the chimney. That's when I knew what Auschwitz was.
You talk about the fact that you smelled
Oh, sure.
a different smell
Oh, sure.
when you first got off the train.
There's
at
a
Auschwitz.
sweet smell in the air. I couldn't figure out what it was. You smelled it, you didn't know. Then the next day, I knew what it was.
And it was?
Bodies being gassed up the chimney and being burned. The burning of the flesh that permeated the entire area. That's when we knew.
Talk to me for one moment about the journey you take to Auschwitz. It is, I believe, 4 or 5 days. You're in a boxcar,
Cattle cars.
cattle car. You're given virtually nothing to eat and nothing to drink.
Correct.
You arrive at Auschwitz. You don't know yet where you are. By the way, there is, of course, a photograph on the back of your book, and we'll show this to our audience. You're sitting on the tracks that lead into Auschwitz. You are here in 1983, 40 years after. You were taken in February of 43. This is in July of 1983. You're sitting on the same tracks that brought you into Auschwitz.
Exactly.
At that time, you did not know where you were. All you knew was you had been taken somewhere.
Right.
You describe in, please understand what I mean by this. When I say exquisite detail, I mean the writing is wonderful, Ernie.
Thank you.
And I should tell our audience that in general. In Promises to Keep, it is a book one cannot put down. It is written extremely well. And you write so beautifully, meaning beautiful writing, not about a beautiful event,
No, certainly not.
about arriving in Auschwitz and what the selection process immediately was for you. And again, that was something you did not know really what was happening.
No idea.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Right. Mengele.
Was it Mengele?
Oh yeah, we found out later. I saw him a few, maybe 7, 8 months later. Beautiful leather coat with a hat, smiling. That was Mengele. He did the selection on that day.
And what did he ask you?
How old?
That's all he asked.
That's all.
And your answer was?
My answer at that time, I was 20 years old.
You said 20.
20.
And he said?
Up.
Thumbs
He went
up.
to the right. He didn't say anything.
Just thumbs up.
And I was pushed to the right. And the others, older, maybe in their 30s, to the left.
Thumbs down.
And immediately, it's just like this. That's how the thumb went.
It was almost the luck of your age.
Well, not only that, but also because I was relatively fit. I had been in a labor camp. We got it wasn't great food, but we had enough to eat. So I was in good shape. I'd done sports. I was a young, active individual.
You had not done sports for many years, Ernie
No,
Michel.
not then, but before the camps,
Okay.
before
But
39.
somehow you did maintain your physical fitness.
Yes, we did, because we worked all the time. We were really hard labor in Germany. In Paderborn, the last place before we came to Auschwitz, we did Kanalreinigung, how do you say that in English? To clean up the sewers. Yeah?
Sewers.
And we stood, if you pardon, in deep, you know what I mean?
Shit.
Yeah.
And by the way, you almost drowned in shit one
Yeah,
day.
one day it flooded. Oh God!
It's funny now. It wasn't funny
Yeah,
then.
it wasn't funny. Today I can smile about it because I'm here, I'm alive, and let me put it this way: I'm a very lucky guy. Despite what happened to me, I'm a lucky person to have survived and have been able to keep the promise that I made that I would want to talk about it, write about it, and become involved in the Jewish community. That's what I've done all my life since I came here.
And of course, that's
But
the
we're going ahead
It's
there.
okay. That's the reference to your title, Promises
Promises
to Keep.
that's right.
I come back now to the day of the selection for you. Thumbs up. You're 20 years old. Thumbs up. You're in good shape. And you go to the right.
To the right.
It is very cold.
Oh, yeah. This was March 3rd. We left Paderborn the February 27th, 28th. We arrived in Auschwitz on March 3rd. It was a bitter, cold Polish winter of 1943.
Did you have a coat?
I brought a coat with me, but it was taken away.
You lost your coat.
Everything, not your coat. I mean, you walked into the camp after we had been processed naked, totally naked. The only thing they asked you to keep was the shoes. Yeah?
Boy, we should make sure everyone understands. When you say naked, you mean absolutely naked except for shoes.
Absolutely
They took
naked.
every bit of clothes, all your
Everything.
underwear.
No, the other thing is the belt. They told us we can keep a belt. The belt and the shoes. That we kept. And then the hair was shown, totally.
From every part of your body?
From every part of the body, from here all the way.
Why do you think they did that?
I think it was, you see, we were slated for labor, for slave labor. And they wanted to use us as long as we could. The time that an individual arriving in Auschwitz was able to work, considering the lack of food, was about 5 or 6 months. In 5, 6 months, your strength was gone, and you were what was called a Muslim. That was a description people were given who didn't have any strength anymore, and then you were slated to go up the chimney. So that was how we arrived at. And absolutely, the question you asked about the hair, I think it had to do with typhoid, with lice, which every one of us had. Everyone had lice. And I developed typhoid fever because of that in the camp. And I was saved by my 2 friends with whom I spent the entire time in the camps.
Felix
Felix and
Hanso.
Hanso, right.
Okay. I'm leading up to a question.
Sure.
Not only had you not eaten or had anything to drink, you hadn't slept for at least 5 days.
4 nights and 5 days, that's right.
Then comes this bitter, bitter cold. Then you think you're going to get to sleep right away, and they wake you up, or they don't even let you get to sleep, and they force you out. That's when, and you also get the tattoo on your arm, the number that you carry to this day in your body.
And I'm proud of it.
What do you mean you're proud of it?
I'm proud of the number. I'm proud of one of those who was in the greatest tragedy that befell the Jewish people, and I survived, and I was able to talk about it. That's why I'm proud of it. I carry this as a mark of honor.
You know, there are some survivors who've tried to eradicate,
I know,
erase
some
it.
have, not too many. Most of them kept it.
It's important to keep it, isn't it?
I think so. I don't walk around, I don't show it, but I'm proud, I have it. I walk around in summertime with short sleeve shirts. I'm almost oblivious to the fact that I have it. Sometimes I see people looking at me. Somebody asked me once, is this what I think it is? And I say, yes, it is.
104995.
104995.
And you talk about how all of a sudden you became a number.
That's all you were, a number. Name was not, the name didn't exist anymore.
Okay, I'm still going to get my question in.
Please.
No food, no drink, no sleep.
Right.
Naked, freezing cold.
Right.
Ernie, why doesn't a person just say, I give up, I quit? You know, sleep deprivation is one of the worst tortures of all. I'm reading your book, and I cannot imagine how a human being doesn't just fall down dead out of lack of everything you need to exist. Can you give us any help? What is it that enables the human being, what enabled Ernie Michel to in some way transcend a physical brutality that is almost beyond imagination?
The only way I can answer you is those who survived, like I, had a tremendous desire to live. I didn't want to give up. None of those who survived wanted to give up. One day, the next day, another week, another week. And incidentally, when we arrived in Auschwitz, there was snow on the ground, so I grabbed some snow, so I at least had some liquid in my mouth. But it wasn't until the day afterwards that we got our first food. And then some of those who arrived with us ran into the barbed wire to
end their life.
To commit suicide, because they knew there was an electrically charged barbed wire. We were told about it. But not too many. Many, like myself, young, 18, 20, 21, 24, felt we wanted to survive, no matter what's going to happen. And some of us did, not too many. For instance, of the transport that I was with, we were about 120, 140 men and women. The women were immediately sent to the gas chamber. None of those survived, not one. Including Ruth. Including Ruth, the girl that I was close to, yeah. I mean, close to, we were kids, you know. She was for Ruth Michel from Frankfurt. I'll never forget her. All gassed immediately. There were maybe 50 or 60 of us who were sent, who arrived in Auschwitz and Pune. There are today about 8 or 9 still alive. 8 or 9. I'm the only one in this country. All of the others are in Israel. I'm leaving next week for Israel. Every year when I go there, we get together. Without fail. Those are people who are as close to me as if they're family. Every year we get together. Last year I celebrated my 70th birthday. How did I celebrate it? I went to Israel. I invited all my survivor friends, their wives, their children, even some of the grandchildren, to come for a celebration. The celebration that we survived. We all have families today. 3rd generation is growing up. And in the book, in Promises to Keep, there's also the story about the World Gathering, which you remember, which I was very proud to have a part in.
World Gathering of Holocaust Survivors.
Right. In June 1981
in Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem, a 4-day event. A celebration of life, not a memorial service. This was something that I always felt strongly about. We wanted to remember those who didn't make it, but we also wanted to indicate to the world, to us, the survival strength of the Jewish people, and that's what we accomplished there.
Am I safe to understand then? You would say there are 2 reasons you survived. 1, luck of the draw.
That is right.
Beyond anything you did or did not do, there was
plain dumb luck
involved in this.
Correct.
And number 2, inside your soul, there was the spirit that said, I will not quit.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how bad it gets, no matter how bad it gets, I will not quit.
That is right.
Did you ever want to quit?
Never. Not once. Well, without going into too many details, because we could spend hours here talking about it. There were incidents when I was hit over the head before I went to the prison hospital, where I felt pretty low. I was close to being a Muslim, almost ready, but I said, another week, another day, another day. I didn't want to give up. And during those years, I made a promise, and this is the title of the book, Promises to Keep, that I would tell the story. I'm glad I've been able to do that.
I am too. Did Felix and Hanzo help you survive?
Well, we helped each other.
Talk about that.
Felix was from Vienna. Hanzo, who was very close, my closest friend, was from Czechoslovakia, and I come from Germany. I'm a Yeke. Yeah? The 3 of us helped each other, supported each other. in every possible way. When I had typhoid fever, Hanso washed me up with cold water 5 times a day to keep the temperature down. One could not have made it without the other. We escaped together in April 1945. And then, if I can tell you that story, which is really a fascinating one, we lost track of Felix. Hanso and I kept in touch with each other, but Felix we lost track of. And no matter what we tried, we always ran into a dead end. We assumed he was dead. And in the book, in the epilogue, there is a little paragraph, all efforts to find him were unsuccessful. When the book came out, somebody called up and said, Michel, you are wrong. Felix Schwartz is alive. He says, what? And he gave me his phone number. He lives in a little town in western Pennsylvania, all by himself. Never married, went from job to job, didn't want to have anything to do. I called him up. Felix, this is Ernst. You remember? He says, yeah, I remember you. Well, we got together on Thanksgiving last year, 1993, for the first time, the 3 of us. And it was a very emotional event for the 3 of us to be together for the first time since 1945, when we escaped 49 years afterwards.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, another incident happened just a week ago. Somebody called me up. He says, Ernie, somebody called me from Cincinnati, Ohio. He said he has the number before you. He read your book, 104994. His name is Henry Mayer from Cincinnati. He's a violinist, a member of what's called the La Salle Quartet. I called him up, and I says, Henry, I didn't remember him. He was standing right before me. You know, M.A., Mayer, Michel, M.I., you know. So he stood before me. I never knew him, didn't know who he was. He called me. I called him. We're meeting next week to have lunch together.
There is, by the way, a bond, is there not, among the survivors?
Oh, yes. We are close to each other. We stay with each other. We have family celebrations together. Everybody has their own lives, yeah? But this is a bond that you cannot take away. In all of Jewish history, there has never been anything like this happen. And as long as we can, we want to be with each other.
Do most of the survivors you encounter have your enthusiasm for life?
I don't know. I think most do, yeah. Because we were given a gift. You know, I've been given a gift of 50 years of new life, never believing it would happen to me, hoping, but never knowing whether it would or not. So I have a very positive outlook. Most of my friends who survived do, but there are many others who still live today under the impact of what happened. I have friends of mine who wake up screaming every night. Every night. They have never been able to get over it. I'm lucky. Again, I said it to you before. Not only was I able to survive, but put it in a positive context in terms of becoming active in the Jewish community. But everybody wears their scars. I do too.
Do you have nightmares?
No, I don't.
Remarkable.
No, I don't. I've somehow been able to, the book helped me, you know. The fact that I spent my entire career working for UJA Federation, becoming involved in all the current events that we are dealing with has helped me. I'm so active with things going on today. No, I don't have nightmares.
You know, there are many survivors who seem so introverted, who don't want to talk about it, who don't even want to talk about it with their children.
That's correct.
And it's not a question of being critical of them, but in some sense, I feel your decision is a wiser one, not only for other people who get to hear the story, but also for their families as a whole.
Well, I agree with you. None of us are without scars. None of it. Some got over easier than others. But God, look what we've been through. I mean, I have never even, other than writing in the book something about it, I don't even want to talk today about the details of the day-by-day life in the camp. It's too gruesome. I mean, I don't want to talk about it. I talk about broad outlines, how I got there, what happened briefly, and then afterwards. And a great deal of the book deals with what happened with my life afterwards here in the United States, and making an adjustment to a totally new environment, to a totally new atmosphere. But this event is something that I believe it'll go down in history as one of the great tragedies, not just in Jewish history, in all of human history. Despite all the things that are happening today in this world, all the murder and the calamities and wars, but never once was an attempt made to wipe out one people from the face of the earth because of the fact that we were Jewish. That never happened before. And this was organized by an elected government. It was a government edict, publicized, to get rid of the Jews. Not only in Germany. He had plans to get rid of the Jews throughout the world. This has never happened before, and God willing, it should never happen again to anybody, Jews or non-Jews.
You know, there's a picture here that you took of your mother, father, and sister.
Right.
On the last day the four of you were together.
Right.
She was then sent to Paris to escape the war, and she did. And of course, you and she have been long since reunited, and she has a family. She lives in Israel. Incidentally, you write, and I have it down here, between you and your sister, 7 children, 19 grandchildren, 16 of whom live in Israel.
Right. You say 19?
I said 16 in Israel, of the 19.
19 grandchildren, 16 living in Israel.
Okay, I got it right. Anyway, you take this photograph of Lottie and your mother and father, Otto and Frida. I want to know how that picture survives.
The picture was sent to a relative here in this country. The picture was taken in March 1939. The war, as you know, broke out in September, so there was still mail service. I took that picture, and I still look at that picture, and I see my father and my mother standing, and in their eyes you can almost see the sense of doom. I know my sister sitting there. My mother washed her hair. She was a little girl. She was 10 years old. And I took the picture. It was sent to a relative here in this country. And when I came over here, she gave it to me, and it's part of my family memorabilia. I don't have too many.
But it's wonderful to have that picture.
Yes, it is.
On September 1st, 1939, Hitler invades Poland.
The war breaks out.
2 days later, there's a knock on your door. And the person knocking says,
tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, railway station, 1 suitcase, some food. Where am I going? Shut up, or something to that extent. Finished, that's it.
The only thing you left out is your name was uttered first.
Yeah, Ernst Israel. You know, everybody, every one in Germany, every Jew, every male was given the name of Israel, and the women were given the name of Sarah. So my name then was Ernst Wolfgang Israel Michel. Yeah?
Knock on the door.
Yeah.
Your name is called out.
Yeah.
Be ready tomorrow.
6 o'clock at the station. 1 suitcase, work clothes, something to eat. You know, that's enough. Shut up, or something like that. And that was it. The next morning we went to the station.
Your mother made you your favorite food.
Yeah, the last
including
night.
Whipped cream, Ernie.
Yeah, the last night. That was the last meal we had together. The last time I saw my parents.
You never saw them again.
Never saw them again.
She packed your bag with you.
She packed my
and
bag.
off you went to the train. Your father took you.
Gave me a piece of chocolate, which he knew I liked. And then we went to the train. And
what did she say to you?
The last thing she said, be a good Jewish boy. That were the last words from her. They were deported in the fall of 1940. They were sent to a camp in Gurs, France, all Jews from southern Germany. I come from a town called Mannheim. They were all sent to a camp. They lived there for 2 years. 2 years later, Vichy France, the French police, under their supervision, sent them to Drancy, which was a transit camp. From there, they were sent to Auschwitz. I have the records. You know, they kept records. The Red Cross in Arleston, Germany has them. They were sent to Auschwitz in August 1942, and they were gassed in Auschwitz.
You came, of course, in February of 43.
I came...
only a few months after.
Without knowing what happened to them. I mean, after they were deported from Mannheim, I never knew what happened to them.
When did you find out the fate of your parents?
Well, I went back to Mannheim after the war was over. After I had escaped in June, I arrived in Mannheim. It's a whole different story. There's so many stories we could talk about.
Promises to keep. Everybody should simply read Promises to Keep. Go ahead.
And where were we?
How did you find out about your parents' fate?
Yeah. I went back to Mannheim. There was nobody there. I was the first Jew to come back to Mannheim, the first one. And I realized after, you know, it became known that there was no hope. My parents by that time would have been in their 70s, and I knew there was no chance. The confirmation I got only, I think, a year or two later when I found out officially from the Red Cross in Arleston that my parents had been sent to Auschwitz in 42. That's when I got the confirmation.
Did you cry?
When I found out about it? No, I don't think I cried.
Did you cry during the entire experience?
I cried, the only time I cried in Auschwitz, actually I never did. I cried when I escaped. The day we escaped, that's the first time I cried. There was such horror. There was such, you know, you didn't have any tears. There was no emotion left. You were a number, you were nothing, you were a slave, you were powerless. I never cried. The first time I cried was after we had escaped.
You took young leadership, UJA young leadership, back to Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke to them.
Mm-hmm.
This hell that you were in.
Mm-hmm.
I think you write in your book, hell is a 24-hour roll call.
Yeah.
And you describe how horrific the roll calls were. By the way, you know, for those of us for whom this is only a story,
Mm-hmm.
it's not something I would have imagined. You explained to me how horrible those daily roll, 2 a day?
2 a day, in the morning, in the evening.
And they went on forever.
Oh, if one person, there was a wrong count, you stood and stood and stood. In the heat and the cold, you weren't allowed to move.
Couldn't put your hands in your pockets
No,
if
there
it
weren't
was
no
freezing?
pocket, nothing.
No pockets anywhere?
Nothing, nothing.
Hell. Anyway, you took a group of people back there.
Mm-hmm.
There is a discussion as to what should happen with Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
Should it be leveled?
Mm-hmm.
You know, should we put a park in a parking lot?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it kept as a memorial? And we know that there are survivors who disagree.
Mm-hmm.
What's Ernest Michel's opinion?
The first time I went to Auschwitz, I went back, was on my 60th birthday. On the day, I'm born 23, July 1. On July 1, 83, I am back in Auschwitz, together with a mission of the United Jewish Appeal. I had never thought I'd do that. Who wants to go back to that place, you know? But by this time, I'm involved in UJA, in the American Jewish community, and one of the chairman of the UJA, Bob Loop at that time, said, Ernie, it would mean a great deal if you would go with us on that mission. And I agreed to do so. My wife said, I'm crazy. On my 60th birthday, spend time here, enjoy yourself. I go back to Auschwitz. I see the deterioration of the camp. It's falling apart. And I came back, and Ronald Lauder, who's become a good friend, helped us to get started on a plan to preserve the camp the way it is. Kalman Sultanik, a good friend of mine, also a survivor, and I became co-chairman of a committee to preserve Auschwitz. We don't want to rebuild it. We don't want to put flowers around it. We just want to keep it. It's the single largest camp that was ever established to kill people, to kill Jews.
25,000 a day.
25,000 a day. And therefore, we've become involved in an international governmental effort We found out, and we sent over several experts from the Metropolitan Museum and the Museum of Natural History, and we were told by experts it would cost about $42 million to preserve it. And after discussing it, we decided we wouldn't want to go into another fundraising campaign. We have enough fundraising going on. So we decided to go to European governments. And we went one by one, first meeting with the ambassadors in Washington, and I must say we were received every time with the greatest respect and understanding. We met now with governments of Germany, Austria, Italy, Norway, Greece, France, Sweden, Denmark, Luxembourg, and they all agreed to participate. We've raised today in excess of 50% of the total amount. Preservation is now going on. I feel, this is my own personal feeling, and that of my co-chairman, Kalman Sultanik, that the camp should be preserved.
Why?
Mark, you know, there are efforts underway today. This never happened. It's a hoax. The deniers of the Holocaust. Hundreds of books and articles been written in college newspapers. This never happened. There's no evidence of it. Auschwitz is an evidence of what happened. That's why I feel strongly that it should be preserved, because Auschwitz today is probably the single biggest tourist attraction in Poland, and one of the biggest tourist attractions in all of Europe. You see buses lined up. You sell ice cream. I mean, incredulous. Ice cream, there's a flower shop, there's a library, kids run around. This is Auschwitz. But this is the world we live in. Buses lined up from all over Europe who go to see what happened. That's why I feel it should be preserved. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, in another generation, there'll be nothing left. It'll totally fall apart. The heat in the summertime, the cold in the wintertime. So I hope to be able, and we've made an effort to begin, and it's now underway.
Incidentally, how do you feel about the fact that in 20, 30 years, certainly a generation, the survivor, him or herself, will be gone, and there will be no one to give first-hand testimony of what happened? Do you ever worry that once the survivors are all gone, the world will want to in some way crush the memory of the Holocaust?
I think there's a great danger in that. And this is one of the reasons I write the book, and why others have written books. And this is why I appreciate an opportunity of this kind of a program, the tapes of which will, I hope, be preserved, articles, audiovisual interviews, tape interviews. I've encouraged every survivor to tell their story. The Washington Holocaust Museum is a beautiful, I mean, if you can use that word, a powerful reminder of what happened. We are trying to create a museum here in New York. We haven't been successful yet. We hope to be able to do it. Yes, there has to be this effort made in order to avoid, to prevent from what you're saying. In another generation, look, I'm now in my early 70s, I'm 71. 20 years, 25 years, I'm one of the younger ones. There won't be anybody left. And I'm afraid that unless this is being told and retold, there's a danger that people will say, well, this is a period, this really didn't take place, people were killed. That's one of the reasons why I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about it.
And speak briefly to one more question. You are one of the stronger ones who came into Auschwitz. Auschwitz was not your only camp, labor camp, or death camp.
No.
There is a trite cliche that you often hear. Why did the Jew go so meekly to the slaughter? And why didn't the Jew resist in the camp? Ernie Michel's answer.
You have to visualize how we lived, under what circumstances we lived. We had clothing, we had no food, we were surrounded by electrically charged wire with machine guns, SS with machine guns. Any attempt and there were some, were doomed to a massacre and to total failure. I believe to survive in Auschwitz, in the camps, is the best answer. That took heroism. I don't want to make myself a hero. I'm not. I'm a lucky guy. I was at the right time at the right place. But simply to survive took an amazing amount of courage and willpower. And that survival was what imbued us during that time. We couldn't fight back. How do you fight back? Am I going to get a guy with a machine gun and hit him? I would have been killed. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. So the very fact that we survived, I think, is an evidence of being able to overcome.
It is marvelous that you survived. You know, I don't know how one sees God's hand in history, but I think in some small way I may be looking at God's hand in history. You are a gift, Ernie Michel. You have been a gift of mind and heart and creativity. You have given not only to the Jewish people through writing, you have served us for more than a generation now. And it has been wonderful to share time and thought with you. My prayer is that Ernie Michel lives another 20, 30, 40 years. You'll write more, you'll lead us more, and you'll give us more of your wisdom. You are a very special, wonderful human being, and I'm honored to know you and call you friend.
Mark,
Thank you,
I thank
Michel.
you. This is a beautiful discussion. I thank you for your sensitivity in asking how you did it.
Thank you, darling.